The hallway of the girls' dormitory smelled of industrial lavender and microwave popcorn, a scent that, to Cindy, smelled like a fragile kind of freedom. For 18 years, Cindy had practiced the art of the ghost in her parents' house. She had learned to walk on the outer edges of floorboards to avoid creaks and to interpret the specific timbre of a slamming cupboard to know if dinner would be served or if she should stay locked in her room. Neglect was a cold shadow, but it had made her a master of the unspoken. When she arrived at college, the silence was different. It wasn't a vacuum. It was an invitation. Her roommate, Rue, was the first person who didn't look through her. Rue was a whirlwind of discarded denim jackets and open laughter, someone who occupied space with an unapologetic grace. While Cindy kept her desk arranged with surgical precision, she kept her truest sanctuary hidden, a digital library of thousands of chapters of romance manhwas. Cindy was drawn to a very particular trope, an obsessive male lead. While others sighed over the gentle second leads, Cindy felt a magnetic pull toward the dark-haired dukes who would burn down kingdoms just to keep the protagonists safe. To her, being watched even to an extreme degree felt more like love than being ignored ever did. These characters didn't neglect, they fixated. And in her loneliest moments, that fixation felt like a warm blanket. As her friendship with Rue deepened, the ghost began to solidify, but the old shadows took on a sharper form. Because Rue was the first person to offer warmth, Cindy became its sentinel. One Tuesday, Rue mentioned she was going to a concert with friends from a biology lab. "Do you want to come?" Rue asked. "I have a lot of reading," Cindy lied. She wanted to go, but the thought of Rue being surrounded by better friends made her throat tighten. That night, Cindy didn't study. She sat on her bed, spiraling. She checked Rue's social media every 6 minutes, analyzing the background of every photo for signs that Rue looked happier there than she did in their room. By midnight, she had sent 4 texts. "Are you okay? Just checking in. Did you get there safe? Sorry, ignore me." To soothe the ache, she opened a new manhwa. The lead was a possessive emperor who had just locked the heroine in a rose garden to keep her from danger. Cindy felt a shameful surge of envy. "I wish someone cared enough to lock the door," she thought. When Rue returned, she found Cindy sitting in the dark, her eyes bright with a frantic, bottled-up intensity. "Cindy," Rue said softly, "you're vibrating. I'm not done with you, but you're living like every breath I take is a verdict on your life. I think you should talk to someone." The office at the health center was small and filled with succulents. Cindy eventually confessed everything to her therapist, the childhood neglect, the panic when Rue didn't text, and even her guilty pleasure in stories about obsessive love. "You're dealing with insecure attachment with obsessive tendencies," the therapist explained. "You learned early on that love is unpredictable, so your brain went into overdrive to protect the first stable connection you found." When Cindy mentioned the manhwas, expecting a lecture on healthy media, the therapist surprised her with a smile. "Actually, Cindy, I don't want you to stop reading them. Let's look at them as a coping mechanism. In those stories, the obsession is a guarantee that the character won't be neglected. It's your safe space where you can experience the feeling of being seen without the real-world consequences of being controlled." The therapist called it a controlled release valve. The goal wasn't to delete the books, but to make sure Cindy knew where the fantasy ended and her life began. The healing was slow work. Cindy stayed in therapy and kept her manhwa subscription, but her relationship with both changed. She started a review journal. Instead of just consuming the stories, she analyzed them. She'd write, "The Duke's behavior here is a response to his trauma. It's romantic in a panel, but if I did this to Rue, she'd feel suffocated." The stories became a mirror, helping her identify her own intense impulses before she acted on them. One evening, months later, Rue was late again. Cindy felt the familiar, cold prickle of dread. She looked at her phone. She looked at the pens on her desk, perfectly aligned. Then she did something new. She opened a chapter of a particularly dramatic manhwa. Let herself enjoy the fictional Duke's over-the-top possessiveness for 20 minutes. And then, with a steady breath, she closed the app. She acknowledged the fear, the small, wounded girl inside who thought she was being forgotten, and told her, "It's okay. We're safe even if we're alone." She didn't send the text. 10 minutes later, she fell asleep, finally comfortable in the quiet, knowing that she was her own sovereign and Rue would be home when the music stopped. The transition from a cramped dorm room to the cold, clinical luxury of the Wayne penthouse was a shift Cindy had mentally choreographed 1,000 times. One moment, she was closing a browser tab on her laptop. The next, she was standing in the shadows of a dimly lit hallway, the air heavy with the scent of expensive cologne and the metallic tong of a destiny in flux. Cindy moved silently, pressing herself against the velvet wallpaper. She knew exactly what was about to happen. This was the nexus point. She saw her, Amelia. The heroine was standing by the mahogany suite doors, but her eyes weren't filled with the naive concern of the original timeline. They were wide with a frantic, jagged terror. Amelia's hand gripped the door handle, then recoiled as if the brass were white hot. Cindy realized it immediately. Amelia had been reborn. She wasn't looking for a hero. She was looking for an exit from a gilded cage she had already died in once. With a sob of relief, Amelia bolted toward the emergency stairs, desperate to leave Anton at his most vulnerable so he would never fixate on her again. Cindy waited. Only when the silence returned did she step out of the shadows. Amelia had run from a monster, but Cindy was walking toward the only man who could ever truly see her. Cindy pushed open the heavy doors. The suite was a wreck of discarded crystal and shadows. Anton Wayne, the billionaire heir to the Wayne Group, was slumped on the edge of the bed. His skin was flushed, his breathing a ragged struggle against the drug burning through his system. Cindy crossed the room, her voice a steady, grounding tether. "I'm Cindy. I'm here to help. Do you want me to call a doctor?" Anton didn't answer. He leaned forward, searching her face, his gray eyes boring into hers. He saw something there, not fear, but a reflected intensity that matched his own. In that moment of silent recognition, he possessed her. The night that followed determined the rest of their lives. Anton claimed her with a feverish, thorough desperation, his hands touching every inch of her skin as if memorizing a map he never intended to leave. He kissed every inch of her, his lips marking her as his territory, owning every inch of her body and soul. For the first time in both of their lives, their screaming demons fell silent, quelled by the sheer force of finally belonging to someone else. In the beginning, the upper crust of the city treated Cindy like a doomed spectacle. Behind the screens of private group chats, secret bets were placed on how long she would last. 3 weeks, the first pool suggested. 2 months, the second bet claimed. But Cindy outlasted every deadline. She blew past the 6-month mark, looking more radiant with every public appearance. As she stepped out of Anton's armored Maybach, draped in silks and diamonds, the pity curdled into a sharp, bitter jealousy. The chatter shifted. I'd give up my privacy too, if it meant being loved with that much intensity. Inside the penthouse, Cindy turned her physical isolation into a creative empire. She spent her days in the sun-drenched library writing fantasy novels under a pseudonym. She didn't know that every keystroke was being mirrored through a tracker on her laptop. One evening, Anton came clean. "I've been monitoring your computer," he admitted, his voice low. "I've read everything. They're masterpieces, but your distribution is inefficient." Cindy didn't care about the tracker. She cared that he loved her worlds. With her blessing, Anton became the silent architect of her career. He bought the publishing houses and optimized the algorithms, doing the heavy lifting in the shadows so she could remain in the light. Eventually, Anton hired Mia as an assistant to handle Cindy's research and fan mail. Initially, he found the new person in Cindy's life threatening and spent his afternoons listening to their library conversations through the audio feeds. One day, he heard Cindy ask, "Mia, don't you find Anton odd? The way he tracks everything? Everyone else calls him a monster." Mia just shrugged. "The world is a messy place. Every pot has a lid. If you're the pot and he's the lid that fits, who am I to judge what either of you like?" Anton felt a wave of profound relief. For the first time, he found himself happy that Cindy had someone else to keep her company while he worked. At a winter gala, Amelia, living her free but exhausting life, finally cornered Cindy. Amelia looked haggard. Her life on a 9-to-5 salary was a cycle of cold apartments, lukewarm noodles, and 2-hour bus rides. She had no Michelin star chefs, no promotions, and no one to pay her skyrocketing bills. "How can you live like this?" Amelia hissed. "He's a monster who won't let you breathe." "Free to do what, Amelia?" Cindy asked softly. "Free to be a face in a crowd that doesn't care if I wake up tomorrow. You chose the stairs and found a world that doesn't know your name. I chose the room and found a man who would burn the world down if I so much as caught a cold." As Anton returned, his hand sliding possessively onto Cindy's waist, he didn't even look at Amelia. She was a ghost. He leaned down, whispering in Cindy's ear, and she laughed, a sound of genuine, unburdened joy. Amelia stood alone, realizing her freedom was just a tragedy of her own making, while Cindy thrived in the center of the only universe that mattered. The final chapter of their story wasn't written in a book, but in the quiet, absolute rhythm of their shared life. As the years passed, the gilded cage of the Wayne penthouse became the most influential seat of power in the city, not through fear, but through a terrifyingly efficient stability. Anton's possessiveness didn't fade, it matured. It shifted from the panicked grip of a man afraid of losing his only anchor to the calm, immovable stance of a man who knew he was home. He still tracked her. He still had a direct feed of her vitals synced to his watch. But now, when he saw her heart rate spike, he didn't call the house in a panic. He simply looked at the time and realized she was likely writing a particularly intense climax in her latest novel. He would send a text, "I've ordered the dark chocolate you like. It will be there in 5 minutes. Take a break, my love." Cindy, in turn, became his tether to humanity. Because she never pushed him away, he never had to pull. He became a more measured CEO, a more thoughtful leader, and a man who finally learned to sleep through the night because he could feel her breathing beside him. Years later, a final meeting occurred. Amelia had managed to save enough for a modest life, but she remained a woman haunted by what-ifs. She saw Cindy one last time at the launch of the Cindy Wayne Literary Foundation, an organization Anton had built to fund thousands of struggling writers. Cindy stood on the stage, the absolute center of gravity. When she finished her speech, she didn't look at the cheering crowd or the flashing cameras. She looked directly at Anton, who was standing in the wings. He wasn't clapping. He was simply watching her with a look of such singular, devouring pride that the air around him seemed to hum. Amelia approached Cindy in the hall afterward. She looked at the ring on Cindy's finger, not just a diamond, but a symbol of a man who had built a world to fit her. "Do you ever wonder," Amelia whispered, "if we were just meant to be different versions of the same tragedy?" Cindy looked at her, and for the first time, Amelia saw true pity in her eyes. "No, Amelia. You thought his love was a cage because you were looking for a door. I knew his love was a foundation because I was looking for a home. You wanted to be free from someone. I wanted to be free with someone." As the gala ended, Anton appeared at Cindy's side. He draped her coat over her shoulders, his fingers lingering on her neck for a second longer than necessary, a silent check, a constant reassurance. Mia is waiting in the car with the final drafts of the sequel, Anton said, his voice low and intimate. And the chef has prepared dinner. Are you ready to go home? Always, Cindy replied. As they drove away in the silent, armored comfort of their car, Cindy leaned her head on Anton's shoulder. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the line of her pulse. Two people who the world called broken had created something indestructible. The girl who grew up invisible was now the only thing one man ever saw. The man who grew up unloved was now the only thing one woman ever needed. In the heart of the city, the lights of the penthouse stayed on a beacon of two demons finally at rest, owning every inch of each other until the very end. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the video. If you enjoyed this, it would mean the world to me if you could like this video if you found it entertaining. Subscribe for more videos in the future. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. Your support helps the channel grow and is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one. Bye.